people meet Cooney and they fall in love with him and everybody thinks he's great. I think a couple of people in the Discord used your, like, the filleting of...
He's a little bit too much of an ideal of a character in a couple of ways. Kind of, again, filleting a little, just like... Sorry, Mom.
Oh, I'm glad you're the one who did that. Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. It's me, your host, Maria, and with me today is my ruggedly handsome co-host, William.
Hey, guys. Rugged and handsome. And what book are we doing today, Maria? Because I remember the author's name, but I don't know that you do.
It's Ken Liu.
Yeah, damn it. Yeah, all right. Yeah, that's getting blurred out.
It is Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, who I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the author's last name correctly.
This is going to be one of those books where we may or may not butcher all of the pronunciations.
I'm okay with the characters' names because I heard them over and over and over again, but I never heard the author's last name. So that's where my problem is. If I have to read it phonetically, I'm going to mess it up.
Well, especially because Asian names never make sense phonetically. Again, I don't know why.
How they're written in English.
That's what I'm saying.
Is written in a way that, like, it comes from linguistics, because linguistics has very specific ways they write sounds that is not how we as English readers read or speak sounds. And unfortunately, just a lot of that has come through with the phonetic readings of the names. And so, like, I suck. But if I listen to it, so, like, I generally do a pretty good job because I listen to the audiobooks, and so I know, like, how to say it.
Let's play a fun, fast game before we even talk about this book. How many names from this book did Will remember? Kunigaru.
Good job.
Jia. Risana. Mata.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember his whole name?
Mata Liandu?
Zindu. Mata Zindu.
Zindu. And Mapire.
Mapidare.
And that's it from this massive book.
You don't remember Mata's uncle? Or his aunt?
Finn and Kokomi.
And then there's Kikomi. Then there's Soto Zindu, which is his auntie. There's Luan, Jia.
I did remember Soto and Luan.
This book is hands down one of the most plot dense and complex, and so many characters. So we'll see how good I do, guys. I'm semi-confident.
This was also a really divisive book, and I understand why. But before we jump into our main opinions of it, why don't you give us like a 60-second summary, Maria, of the premise?
There is the islands of Dara, ruled by ancient gods that represent each of the different lands. One of the lands has two. Kokoro has two gods because they're lucky, I guess. Rappa and Rana. Anyway, these lands recently had been taken over by one Emperor Mapidare of the Kingdom of Zana, because they were really, like, everybody was like, "Ooh, Zana, you suck. You're fucking the worst." And Mapidare, whose name used to be something else, but I can't remember it.
Raison.
Raison was like, that doesn't sound nice. I'm going to make everybody rue the day that they spat in Zana's face, and I'm going to do a heckin' takeover. And he does. He, like, gets lucky with some battleships and some magic air. Not some magic air, but basically he finds helium. He finds
magic helium.
He takes over everything. He rules with an iron fist. And this is the result of what happens when a bunch of places that used to be independent are now coalesced together as a unwitting empire, unwilling empire, and what shall happen after the death of Mapidare, and what will happen to his empire.
The different people who are going to vie for control. And there are two main characters. There's I already forgot his name. Kunigaru, who is like lazy, what is it? Crouching idiot, hidden badass kind of thing, where like he's lackadaisical and he doesn't do the things he's supposed to, but actually he's a really good dude and a really good administrator. And then there's Mata, who is like a giant of a man who was raised from childhood for revenge.
8 foot,
and he has
man.
double irises, which I still don't really understand what that means. But that's kind of like, the two are set on first paths where they're going to meet, and then they're going to split and become, maybe rivals, maybe enemies, and that's the plot.
The goal that this book is trying to do is show that I think history and empire is complicated, because even in the beginning, when everybody's like, "Ooh, fuck the empire, Mapidari sucks balls," there's also a point where they're like, "But now we get spicy food from Dazu. That's pretty cool. And look at all these other new people that have brought all these new things. Look, diversity. What a world." And you're like, okay, that's cool. And what it is independence with constant wars versus unification with peace, better, and basically, what do the ends justify the means? The horrific actions of war, are they worth it? It's going into all that jazz. It's is a tyrant going to be remembered as a tyrant 1,000 years from now? You don't know. Are you, as the rebel, going to be seen as a crazy zealot 1,000 years from now? You don't know. What is history? What are the people going to say? And the thing I liked the best was the idea that for the common people, all of this is fucking garbage. None of it matters. At the end of the day, farmers got to farm, fishermen's got to fish, shipbuilders got to shipbuild. And so these games are happening above people, and it also, I think, is a battle, and here I'm going to need serious shenanigans. One of our patrons to
Taoism versus Confucianism.
Taoism versus Confucianism as influences and kind of ways of life kind of coming to a head.
Philosophical.
This book is not set in any actual ancient Asian country. The author is Chinese American, but is a land inspired by a lot of the myths. And
I basically thought of it as China by way of Pacific Islander. Like, that is basically the vibe I got of it.
I mean, I thought of it that way as well, but I thought of it more as just like a combination of a bunch of things that were representative of different parts of Asia, but it's just the mythology in general. But anyway, this place is called Dara. Dara is a collection of islands. It has, I think in the beginning, there's only 6 or 7
Okay,
lands.
this is a problem. After the book, I looked at a map to be like, okay, maybe now that I know everywhere. No. None of the names did I remember, and so the map meant nothing to me.
There's Kokoro, Dazu, Dimu. The other one that has Dimu in the beginning.
Tan something? Hyundu?
Hyundu? What are you?
That's what I'm saying. This book has a serious problem with names where it's like, and I'm sure some of this is just from not speaking Chinese.
What are you talking about? These are all... There's Kokoro, the place where the majority of the stuff happens. Amu, which was that other island, the place where that one guy was from, where Gafika is. Araluigi, that's where Kikomi was from.
Oh, and Mario was from there too.
Ha'an is where Luan was from.
Again, part of it is that, I don't speak Chinese, so a lot of these names just sound exactly the same to me. But I think this is a problem we've talked about before in epic fantasy, about just how, even with English names, it's very hard sometimes to remember, or just generic fantasy names, it's very hard to remember who is who a lot of the time. And this book has that a lot, especially because they all have names from the same... It's not like some of them have Vietnamese names and some of them have Chinese names and some of them have Japanese names where you could kind of tell the area by the name. No, they all sound exactly the same, and it's so hard to remember who is what and what is going on. You don't have the North, King's Landing, Dorne.
Mask of Mirrors was harder for me initially than this was. I actually didn't have a hard time. Judo should just put all the islands or all the nations in the gods, or the Kiro states in the Tiro states in the gods, and I knew all of that.
I recognize none of those. And we need to talk for a minute about how this book is written, because it's written in a really unusual style. And that kind of affects how well you can remember names. I think it was Lindbergh in the Discord said that it's kind of basically a bunch of vignettes strung together. And I think that's kind of very accurate in terms of how it's written. And it's also written from a very distant above perspective. You are not there's not a sense of immediacy with the characters like you would in a normal book. You kind of hear, and it's a book that's very telly in that it will just tell you what characters are thinking sometimes and what they're doing. It's not supposed to be realism. It's supposed to have more of like an epic tone and distance. And like that works for some people and not for others.
This is a documentary book.
Yeah.
It is written like a documentary. You know, in documentaries where, like on episode 2 of the 8-episode documentary about the thing that you're watching, they introduce a new character, but then they stop. They don't just introduce this new character. They stop and they explain his family, the notable people who surrounded him, the context of how he got to this point, and then it picks back up and connects back to the story. That's this book. This book is a documentary about a war that never happened. And I liked it. I have a lot of complaints.
I should say, yeah, overall, I enjoyed this book, but my feelings on it are much more scattered than they normally are when coming into one of these. Like, normally I have a take on a book that I've developed and cohesed by the time I get to do these reviews, but mine is still sort of scattered here. So we're going to kind of have to find it as we go. But sorry, you were saying?
Once I began to approach it, because, like, your girl likes a good documentary. And so once I began to stop thinking of it as a classic novel that is where characters and the beat by beat plot is the point, because the characters are not the point of this. There will be times where you will be sad for them, or sad things happen to some characters. Again, as Nauman dies, thinking how he just wanted to be in his little house with his doggy and the lamb tailbones.
No, that was so sad.
I know, it's so sad, but he invoked a doggy. It makes it really hard when you invoke a doggy. We're all going to be sad about it. Anyway, but that's not the point of this book. This book is not about individual people or characters at all. It is about the movements and actions and large-scale events that create a change in power. Miss Allie Snow says, it makes sense because I don't like documentaries either. Penny says, I like Maria calling it a documentary because that's what it feels like, and once I decided to roll with that, I enjoyed it much more. The first half was tough for me to find a groove. I was having that same issue. What actually made me think it was a documentary was in our Discord. I think it was Lindbergh and maybe Sirius. There was a group of people talking about how the characters are not central to the book, how the characters are kind of taking a back seat to the plot that is happening. And I went, like, in that moment, I was like, oh, it's a documentary. This is a documentary. That's what's happening here. Judo Shrew, all right, Sirius says, he invoked the dog so hard his patron god intervened. I like to think Kishi is still feeding that dog. Me too.
So cute. I will say that I really like documentaries, and so I'm the kind of person who will get lost on Wikipedia for 4 or 5 hours just reading history pages. Like that is just a thing that happens to me regularly. It's a problem. But and so in the way that he will sometimes just go off and talk about an island for a minute, or he'll talk about big events for a minute, I enjoyed that. I understand not all readers will. It really is you have to be in that vibe and energy. What I felt like was a little bit less affecting was how when it came to the themes and the characters, that distance I don't think worked quite as well. I think it worked better in the first half than it does in the second. I felt like in the first half I was okay more with the distance and the fact that certain characters, namely Kunigaru, are basically just like perfect. Well, he's really the only one who's like perfect. But like, some of the characters are like a little bit. The book tells you about certain things they do sometimes. Like I'm specifically thinking of Mata, where you're like, I don't know quite that is an organic thing the character did versus you just telling us that this is the kind of character you wanted. Mm-hmm. And so that distance and documentary tone, I don't know that it worked as well when it came to the themes as characters, but I didn't disenjoy reading. Like we read The Massening Part 2 last week, and that was horrible to get through.
It was terrible. Like, this was a breath of fresh air purely by the fact that I did not want to just murder myself every 15 minutes. So, you know.
Yeah, again, I enjoyed this book while I was reading it. Again, I don't think the second, I think partly the book is too long. And like people have said that, like, you know, for epic fantasy, this is not super long. It's actually shorter than a Game of Thrones, take a shot. But it feels really long. And I think like an hour or two less would really help the book out. And also because sometimes like nothing really happens. There's a problem in the book where sometimes nothing really big happens.
For me, it's interesting because I was listening to this yesterday while I was helping Katie put wallpaper up in her new house, and she had read about 100 pages in and then just knew she wasn't going to finish on time. But she let me listen to what I was listening to yesterday while we were doing stuff, and it was funny because like the last time she saw Kunigaro and Mata, they were friends. Surprise for her. But it was interesting because there was a point where it did just pull back and it was talking, like the narrator was just talking to the reader about the overarching, like the history of a region, the history of, I think it was Jin Mazzotti it was talking about. And Katie was like, I like this. She goes, I actually like this better than when it is like right next to some of the characters, because it has that almost like a really well written kind of snarky textbook vibe to it, which is great. And then I think you're right. Well, I think sometimes when it is closer to the characters, what the documentary needs to happen is not always, because we don't spend enough time with the characters to see them develop where they need to be to do some of the things they later need to do, because we spend a lot of time away from them. It does sometimes feel like it isn't as organic to the character, but it could have been, like if it had been led up to the same way. And so I think that in and out, zoom in, zoom out thing is a little bit of a disservice. I think for what the author was trying to do, it was the best version of that, maybe.
I think the problem is that we're more accepting of abstraction in terms of like talking about a world or even kind of talking about themes, and we're less okay with it when it comes to characters.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in a documentary, you're inherently looking at a real person doing a real thing, and so there is a realism to that. And there's also an extent in a documentary that it's understood that you are on the outside looking in. Like this book would be very different if it didn't have any internal narration. It was just a strictly third person, omniscient, or not omniscient, but just third person. Like this book would feel very different. And so I think again, we're less accepting of abstraction when it comes to characters and their arcs and again some of the themes. But yeah, there is a snarky textbook feel to it that I think. I think he's a really talented writer. I think he's a really, really talented writer. And I think the book only works as well as it does because he is so talented. I think a less talented writer would not be able to make this work at all.
Now, another comment that is specifically a Mariaism, this book does the too many things thing. and this, I mean, primarily in plot, not even in just, because, like, listen, this book does have three major overarching things. Rebellion, gods are involved, and there was a third one I had.
Confucianism versus Taoism.
Yes, those are the three conceits of the, like, overarching, because you go in and if you go in thinking this is going to feel like a fantasy with like magic and it doesn't. It feels more like almost like a steampunk. What did you say?
Silkpunk is how he's called it.
Yeah, Silkpunk. With like gods up above, rather than like straight up fantasy. For me, there was points where I felt like there was 4 different climaxes, 4 different like falling actions, and I kept thinking the book was over hours and hours before the book was over. And it was one of those things where I've just grown to realize about myself that I like books with a tight scope. And this scope is really big. And unfortunately, I like really big things.
I've known this about her for years, guys.
I like really big stories, but I like them split up into distinct conscious chunks. Now, this book tries to do that by making different parts.
It was a bit of a too much all the time things. And there's a certain extent to which, again, I think if it was shorter, this would be less of a problem, but it feels very long, partly because he is taking the more abstracted textbook look to it. But a couple comments. Miss Ali Snow said, that's true. It felt more like characters on a stage reading lines than real people to me. Yeah, it does. And sometimes that works. Like when Kunigaru is actually being like funny and trickstery, but then other times it doesn't really. Some of the stuff with like Mata, I don't think worked internally. Angry Otter says the only character interactions I liked were Gia slam poetry and the gods argue. That was very funny.
I loved the guard.
And Penny says, characters are important to me, and I think that's what contributed to my frustration because that wasn't the point of the book. I had to really change my perspective for this one. This book is very heavily dependent on vibe and your expectations going in.
Honestly, I think that is going to be a huge, because like Will and I said, this author is talented. Like what he tries to accomplish and in the ways he accomplishes some of it is actually really impressive. And I liked Snarky Textbook, but if you are a reader who lives and dies by the characters, or who wants a smaller scope for your story, who wants to be more emotionally involved, who wants something that feels more like an authentic character arc that you sit through beat by beat, I don't know that this book is for you. And I say this as someone who did enjoy this book, and I did enjoy the play of the different themes. I enjoyed a lot of I think the only thing that I'm really going to have a problem with is the use of a couple of female characters in ways I didn't love. And I never felt like the technology felt as organic to the story as I wanted it to be, and as I think the author wanted it to be. And also, just for me, it's long. But as someone who enjoyed this, I think a lot of people are not going to like this. I think a lot of people are going to go in and be like, why am I reading a history textbook? What the fuck is happening? I enjoyed it. I read
again,
it.
I think you kind of have to be on its wavelength. And again, I enjoyed it too. It's weird because usually when I read a book, I know that I will like it more in retrospect than I did at the time. Spinning Silver, I adore that book in retrospect, but at the time I was like, meh. And like, this is just a thing I know I do with books. This book is weird because I enjoyed it in the moment, and the more I'm sitting with it, the more it's souring on me a little bit, and the more I wish some of its flaws, because I don't think some of its flaws are inherent. I do think he could write character interactions a little bit better. I don't think he necessarily had to have that as mythic a tone when it comes to the characters and their thoughts, because sometimes he will just tell you things about the characters and what they're feeling and thinking and like their philosophies that they don't realize, and it almost borders on an omniscient narrator telling you about the character versus the character experiencing something, and like that didn't always work for me, and I think he could have done it better. But overall, I think, yeah, this is not a bad book by any means. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Shudoshu/Serious Shenanigans says, I like that it's not as character influenced just because it shifts up what can be a good story. It reminds us that common wisdoms aren't set in stone. Also, that the class conflict in this book is really juicy. Taoism is also a sort of nice bridge between Chinese and American culture, as it is much more individualistic, more progressive and accepting, but also emphasizing going with the flow. Pearl said, part of the story's extended structure makes me wonder if it's because Liu followed the events of the Chu Han contention fairly closely. Penny says, I'm conflicted. There were things I enjoyed, but there were things that I did not vibe with at all. And Miss Ali Snow says, maybe not have everyone immediately fall in love with Kuni and his good vibes. This was also a comment that I'm going to make. Because the thing is, I don't mind people falling in love with Kuni. I fell in love with Kuni. I liked that he was a chubby beer belly guy. Who just like was a good bureaucrat and could run a city, and like he was crafty. I like that. But I do think, like, I was all here for him and Mata to be friends, but I wanted them to disagree at first, and then for Mata to see the ways in which Kuni's plans work and how what he originally took as like sneaky silliness actually works as a military strategy, and that is what bonds them together, rather than the two of them just kind of coming out the gate. And same with Luan Jia, or Zia, where I wanted him to like get to know his Luan, Zia, and Kuni are the greatest example of people meet Kuni and they fall in love with him and everybody thinks he's great. I think a couple of people in the Discord used your like the filleting of
you know, the thing for me with Kuni is that he's a little bit too much of an ideal of a character in a couple of ways. I am okay with him being a good person and really likable and just having that charisma that people start to like him. But the fact that not only is he like a rascal, but also he's good at administration and likes administration was like a weird thing for me. And also that his moral clarity all the time and that he was always right morally, not some of the things he does, but in the ways he sees things, felt like kind of, again, filleting a little, just like, you know? Sorry, Mom.
Oh, I'm glad you're the one who did that. Shamed? Make a gift, please. I need it. Okay, I wanna highlight some comments. So we made the comment about who Cooney was, and then Penny goes, and on the opposite end, Mata is an overpowered kid throwing many tantrums. Angry Otter says, I hated when Mata and Cooney met, and Kite Guy met Cooney. Also, Angry Otter is the one who was using filleting Cooney in the in the chat. And Angry Otter said, they were like, I love your aura, bro, which is kind of how it felt at the time. Penny says, I didn't really bond with Mata and Cooney because I immediately thought that it was gonna fall apart sooner than later. I really was hoping the author wasn't gonna do that, and then it happened and I was sad. Icefellow says, Cooney just has a ton of wrists.
And the thing is, like, that is okay. I get that people like him. He comes off that way, but it's just some of the ways. It's interesting because him and Mata, some of the ways that Mata is bad feel like the author's hand in the same way that some of the ways Cooney is good feels like the author's hand. Like, yes. Every once in a while with Mata, I was like, but really? Like, it's hard to feel a character's descent from good intentions to bad actions when it doesn't necessarily feel like it's springing from the character, which is what happens with Mata. I think also the lack of Cooney and Mata bonding is just the author not writing it well. Like that section should have been so much funnier and better than it was. Like that is just like a lack of care or skill.
So Pearl has some great comments that I really resonate with, and that I thought this is where this was going to go. I think if the author wanted Cooney being too nice to be his ultimate weakness, he should have emphasized that a bit more. Cooney is almost too good at some points. And I don't think so. I think people can be like that. But I think he should have, by making a decision he thought was the...
One thing they say at times is being kind to your enemies is being mean to your allies or something, or your soldiers or something like that, which is like an interesting thing.
And I wish that would have happened at least once to Kunigaru. I don't feel like... Because a lot of the times things went bad to Kunigaru, it's because of things other people had done or things his advisors had led him to do. It wasn't stuff that he himself had decided on. And I would have liked if there had been a decision, just one or two in this massive book, where that Cooney made, and it just ended up not being the right decision to make. Or perhaps it ended in the way he wanted to, but at a cost greater than he expected. And just for that to be part of it. Pearl then says, part of it is because I think people don't usually think being too nice is a weakness, but it certainly has the power to bring down an empire. And then Sirius says, Mata is really, really traditional. And he is, but almost to the point where he becomes a caricature. And
well, I think that's where the whole abstractness of the book comes back to bite it. This book also has a problem where it wants to talk about the past a lot, but it actually doesn't really explain the past particularly well. About halfway through the book, they're like, all these fights between the normals and the commoners always suffered, and you're like, really? You're mentioning that now? Like, and then it starts to really emphasize that no matter who was winning among the nobles, the peasants lost. And I was like, I kind of thought they weren't. Like, it starts trying to bring up what the pre-Mapidare period was like, and we weren't there, and we don't see the consequences of it. So
and it should have been mentioned earlier. Like, because there's a point where they're like, Mapidare did get rid of all the wars that were happening on a year by year basis and unify us. And, is it so bad to be one Dara? And for that to work, we need to have a much clearer idea of what Dara looked like when they were just the 6 Tiro states, and what the lives lost were like back then. Because we don't get a clear idea of that. So it makes, like, 3/4 through the book for them to say that a little bit harsher, because what I felt like was that Mapidare did this thing. He had grand goals, but he was also a bit of a jackass. But I didn't feel in the beginning, outside of what his goals were, which were in his head very grand, and I could see why some of them, like, I like the idea of peace. Who doesn't like the idea of peace? But your corvée systems suck. But And I think we would have needed that a little bit earlier for it to work.
Miss Ollie Snow has a really great. Too forgiving sounds like a work interview answer when the boss asks what's your biggest flaw, and I say I care too much.
Too much.
That's exactly what it feels like. It feels like one of those flaws that's not a flaw, like when characters are too bold or brash. And you're like, okay, but that's not like you didn't really pick a terrible flaw for that one, unless the book is going to know that that's often not a bad flaw and really hammer it, which I don't think this book quite does as much.
So somebody said, does Kuni have a weakness? Pearl goes, yes, he does. He lets too many enemies live. And then the consequences of Kuni's weaknesses are more foreshadowed for the long term. And I do think that's why people don't really see it honestly. Whereas Mata's weaknesses bite him in the ass right away.
See, I don't see Kuni's weaknesses as really biting him that much, though.
They haven't. That's her point. They're going to in the next.
And also, I don't see that letting his enemies live is ever like that. Never really comes back to bite him in the book.
I think the point is that it will in the next book.
But almost all his enemies are also dead. Yeah, no, I get it. But and then also, Judastru, going back to the character thing, he is a character. He is an avatar of Confucian values. Yeah, the problem is most people don't like characters to be avatars of things. They like them to be people. And in, that's kind of outside of like parables, that's just kind of a thing we do is people, and especially in an already relatively realistic world, it's weird for characters to just be avatars of things versus actual people.
And I think that's part of this problem is this book is, while being a documentary of this event, is also a parable on top of having some characters that feel like actual characters. And it's interesting because some of the characters that felt the most like actual characters end up getting goddamn fridged.
And with that, let's immediately jump into the plot, which I don't know how we're going to summarize because it's so much shit happens and so much of it also is like not actually core to telling you what happens in the story. Like a lot of it can just be skipped. So I think we should probably just do the bare outline and then just stop every time we come across a thing we wanted to talk about.
That's exactly what I was going to do. So the scene opens with the attempted assassination of Emperor Mapidare, which happens, I don't know, when Kuni's like 15 and when Rinkoda is like 15. They're little shits, skipping out on school. And Emperor Mapidare is like going to all the different states, and he's like, look at me in my procession. I'm such a badass. But he's very old. One of the things you learn is that in his quest for eternal life, he took a lot of potions, and now he's dying. He's very old. They aged him quickly. But as Rinkoda and young Kunigaru are standing in this mob, watching the parade go by, a bird is seen on the horizon. Only no, it's not a bird. It is someone riding a kite, and they're dropping bombs. And trying to hit Emperor Mapidare, but his head of his guards was really on it and saved him, and so it didn't work. And then the bird kite guy flies off, and Kuni's like, wow, look, one man can threaten the empire. And he also looks at Emperor Mapidare and sees fear on his eyes, and he's like, he is just but a man. And then, like, fast forward, Kuni is a gangsta. He didn't do super well in school, despite his parents wanting him to get gainful employment. He's just doing his own thing. He often bums around on his friends' couches. But underneath the hard exterior of a gangsta, he is still funny and shit-talky. And also, there is a good heart with morals. And he like
a sense of something greater that will take hold of him at some point. Which
he saves
really
this one kid's life, and then a girl happens to be standing there and is like, that guy's interesting. He looks like a gangster and a thug, but he just did something very nice. That's cool. Surprise, this is Gia. She will marry Kunigaru. She is the daughter of a very wealthy merchant who has just come into the city. He tries to break into her father's party, and she's like, I know you. And he's like, why are you spying on me, ho? And then they talk. She gives him slam poetry. He gives her bad takes on actual poetry. They end up falling in love and somehow convincing her family to let her marry him.
I love that throughout the entire book, we keep having to know, like, oh, their family still doesn't like them. Like, there's something very funny about the in-laws never liking them, and his father never really liking him that much either.
There's just moments where the narrator is hysterical, and
there are little details that really help to flesh out the world and make them feel real.
Ooh, some information. All of Gia's poetry session is historically accurate. That is so cool. And so at this point, old Cooney has to get an actual job and support a wife. So he joins the corvée system, which is the corvée is the system by which they get people who are either don't have enough money to pay their taxes, who have extra sons or family members, and they like pack them up to go be slaves to build the mausoleum for a king. It was Mapidare, now it is Eroshi, his son, who sucks. He had a better son, but this one Chatland got very flippin' butthurt.
Basically, there was a coup essentially to. Yeah. So there's a thing in this book where fate is a very important concept but the thing is the book doesn't really explain it, which is weird because the book explains a lot of things. So like and characters accepting or not accepting their fate is also kind of a thing, but again, it's never really explicitly stated or even really explained. So I'm not actually sure how coherent it is. So like when the son who was the crown prince gets the message that says like, hey, you need, here's poison or whatever, kill yourself. I don't think it's actually poison. You're no longer the crown prince. He just accepts it. He accepts it and he dies. He kills himself. And like at various other points, there are characters who will like just kill themselves because they feel like that's kind of where their lives have what they want from their lives or where fate has led them. Again, I don't really know how coherent this is.
I think the point is that it is an honor, a way to get, because a lot of the time in like the Western world, especially with Christianity, suicide is considered very, very, very dishonorable. You're not supposed to do it. Heckin' bad thing. But it definitely has a different connotation, and I think it is an honorable action when there are no honorable actions left. And so it's set up in the very brief scene we had with Eroshi's older brother. It set him up to be an honorable character, and his and so for me, it made sense that he would do the thing that would not place his family in shame, would not put shame upon himself. He trusted his father, and he did the honorable thing. And so for me, I think that was less of a problem. I kind of bought that because it just felt...
No, I agree. Sometimes I bought it, but other times it felt kind of forced. Or also just like characters, which I know you'll talk about, just cool characters just die, and you're like, that was weird. Why did they make that decision? Why did the book corner them like that?
There's so many cool characters that just die and have to die. Anyway, so there's a coup. Mabidare's youngest son, Eroshi, who has a scholar as his regent, and the scholar is absolutely uninterested with anything. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. The corvées are real shit, but old Cooney starts working as part of them. Meanwhile, I have to explain Mata Zindu. Mata Zindu is the last, him and his uncle, Fin Zindu, are the last of the Zindu clan, which were the big, they were from Tanoa, they're the big martial clan of the Kokru Tiro state. The Zindus had been the marshals for Kokru for like ever. It's a whole... They're just like the epitome of the most noblest, bestest fighters. Like his grandfather was like tiny and scrawny, but then this old sword master who was really good. This kind of reminded me of the beginning of Rurouni Kenshin, but it's fine. Mm-hmm. Was like, here, carry this cow to the river every day, and then eventually you'll be strong and giant. And he was really good. And Mata Zindu has been raised with purpose, and the purpose is revenge for the Zindu clan. When Mapidare came in, he fucked up the Zindus. He got rid of, not great stuff. Burned a lot of people, killed a lot of people, and Fin Zindu was young. He was left with his nephew, and just the last of the Zindu clan, and he was like, I shall get revenge upon it. And Mata was a hulking child, hulking boy. He had 2 irises. Everybody was like, well, that guy's going to be special. At like the age of 13, he was like strapped. He was like already 6 foot something. By the time he's full grown, he's 8 foot. And so he is just, he knows swordplay. He knows fighting. He knows military strategy. He is built on honor, baby. Judo Shrew makes the point that he is the ideal of Confucianism. He honors like mourning periods, honoring your family, which also makes me upset about how the stuff happened with Kikomi, because like he can't be the paragon of Confucianism and then get so mad at his uncle. Like I feel like he should have gotten mad at Kikomi. But anyway, it is what it is. But and he has been kind of just floating around, training, doing stuff.
He's essentially that archetype of the hero, the prince who was banished and became like. There's actually literally a character later who's like the prince that became a shepherd who then became a king again. But Mata is that mix kind of with the like I will take vengeance on those who have killed my family type of a thing. And so he contrasts quite a lot with Kuni. Because, Mata is also like somebody said, he does not know how to flirt with women. And like that's very Mata's character. He's very like straightforward. He's not great socially, even though people like do like to follow him because he's so fierce and like godlike in a lot of ways later in the book. But yeah, he just starts out pretty much just like watching, I think, the assassination.
Yes. Yeah, he hears about the assassination. They want to do something, but like his family is kind of staying on the DL. Anyway, during one of the corvée like transports taking a group of people from one area to another area, these 2 guys who I think are the guards or they're part of the corvée group, it's Shigen and what was his name? Shigen was the guy he had killed.
You are alone on an island.
It was Zopa Shigen and Zopa Shigen. Come on, guys. Huno. Yes. Okay. Shigen and Huno.
One thing to mention is that what the laborers are doing is they're going to go build underground tunnels beneath the islands. And it's like super bad. It's people die. It's super hard. Everybody hates the Mapidere and the Empire for like doing that to them. And so like, it's like there's hardship underneath. And these men know that like if they get to the place where they're supposed to show up late, they'll have an ear cut off and then a hand, and they're like, oh shit, we're gonna be late, so we're basically dead men walking.
So these 2 guys, Huno Krima and Zupa Shigen, decide they're gonna go buy like food and stuff for everyone because they're screwed anyway, and they come back and they're like, who here knows how to cook? And these 2 brothers, Ratho and Defiro, are like, we can cook. And like they open up this fish they gave him, and in the belly of the fish, there's a scroll saying, Zupa Shigen and Huno Krima are going to be the king, lead the rebellion and become the kings, and it's God proclaimed, everybody should follow them. And they pretend, they're like, oh, we will be killed now that this has come out. What are we going to do? I guess the only thing we can do is embrace our fate because we're dead men anyway. And the men who hear them are like, wow, oh man, sucks to suck. We will follow you to your glory. And they start a rebellion. There is no rebellion. And the entire rebellion that this book is about to follow, the ups and downs of, is started by 2 guys being like, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to pretend the God said we're going to be kings. Fuck y'all. And they start this rebellion. And they end up getting so much popular support because, again, Mapidare's rule, like we are at the start of a 2nd generation of this empire, and he wasn't emperor for super long. So this is all real fresh. And so when these people start rebelling, they get followers really quickly, and they keep just because of overwhelming numbers, but lack of organization, kind of making progress. Like they go to places and they're like, you know what, screw it. The emperor's forces are really far away. Take it. You can have our. And so they're just going and going. And then, I think, Huno Krima has the idea to, find the king of Kokoru, who is a shepherd, and reinstate him as to show that, like they're just here to do they're just They're doing
he can
good
be a figurehead.
While this is happening, old Zuni, Kuni is back in Zudi, being like head of the corvée, and like he hears about the rebellions, and he's like, yeah, whatever. But then he is transporting a corvée group, and they're gonna be late, and he realizes, oh god, we're so late that they're gonna kill me. And they're like, and he's been, all of the people in his corvée group that he's transporting are like, wow, you're so nice. You like let us not wear shackles, and you make sure we have good food, and you treat us kindly. And he's like, oh god, I'm gonna die. I'm just gonna become a bandit. I was a thug before and a gangster. We're just banditeering, guys. Who's up for it?
I will follow the way of the virtuous bandit, which I thought was funny that's like a trope. So this is a thing I don't like in that, and one of the ways that I think the author Kuni is that Kuni goes from not like, again, he is somebody who leads men to a brutal existence, and he's like fine with it, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh, you know what, this is bad, I'm gonna stop doing that. And it's like, where did this moral understanding come from?
That's not why it happened. He was going to die.
No. I understand that's why he did that, but what I'm saying is that his moral understanding after that point doesn't. After that point, he will become much more of a. He'll become like a champion for the people and like the common man. And it's like, where did you go from being complicit in human trafficking and slavery to all of a sudden having all these moral understandings? If you are okay with the human trafficking, that implies a certain amount of a person who doesn't really question authority and kind of just goes along with the morals of, like, there's a later point where he'll white knight for a bunch of women and be like, don't make fun of him by saying he's a woman, say something else because women are strong. And it's like, okay, but if you have those kind of radical views against the normal cultural values, then like, but you are also okay with just leading men to their deaths. Like it's a thing where like it doesn't really feel like it tracks with what came before.
I agree, but for me, I found it a little bit more like his slope into becoming like a moral high ground a little bit slower. It wasn't until he was like leading the rebellion that I thought he really got to that point. When he was a bandit, because he's literally like stealing from people, I still thought he was in a morally
bad
gray
people.
Merchants, rich merchants. He's stealing from rich merchants.
Here's the thing.
His family are rich merchants.
I like Kuni as like that kind of affable, very charismatic, means to do good, but also is maybe like a little bit lackadaisical and lazy guy. But the problem is that it's at points in the book that doesn't super make sense. So one of the things we didn't mention is that previously, when he became a administrator person, right, for after being a gangster, he really likes doing the work, and he actually, or I don't think it's
that's what it is. She's right. Ice Willow got us. Isn't it because he meets people who represents those new ideas? Ice Willow, like he meets a couple of people he delivered to the caves who lost their hands, and it made him think more. So I do think, because I don't remember having that like moment of being like, oh wow, he's really changed his views. I thought it was actually quite gradual, and like for me, it was fine.
To me, he never really had a moment where he was like, oh, I used to do that horrible thing. Why did I just, like, that should cause him a bit of a crisis of faith to understand that he cut off these people's arms. And mostly he's like worried they're going to be mad at him and then doesn't think about it again. Again, I like Kuni as kind of the rogue, but the places where he's not a rogue, I thought were kind of lame. Like, again, he's good at administrative work, or like, I kind of liked how he was at the original part of the rebellion, where like, he doesn't really know what he's doing and he gets half his bandits killed. And I like the idea that he thinks of himself as a virtuous bandit, but I wish the book had undercut him sometimes so that his growth from those moments felt a little bit more earned.
I think the problem is, and Miss Allie Snow hits it on the head, we're never close enough to Kuni to know how he feels conflicted about stuff, at least not in the first 120 pages. And unfortunately, we speed bypass all of this. We come in for the moment that the thing happens, and then we leave Kuni, and when we come back, he's in a different position. We don't spend enough time with any of and that's why I was saying, if you are looking for a character arc and development where you are step by step with the character each step of the way as they're having these revelations, this isn't it. This outside of a couple of times where characters are thinking and make specific decisions, you don't get characters like sitting and like thinking about their fate a lot, especially Kuni. I can't think of very many times. The one character I think about is the scholar regent who just like sits and thinks about how he'd rather be writing treatises of
funny.
philosophy than anything else. But for the most part, we're in action scenes. Things are happening.
Yes and no, because sometimes the book will just stop to summarize the person's philosophy. Like especially with Bata later on, or Kuni, it'll just stop to talk about it. So
but
yes
that's not
and
going to
no.
do what you want. Like that's not what you're asking.
No, that's what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that it does do that at times. So it does have the space to do it, but it doesn't actually try and make that more realistic with the characters.
And again, I think that just harkens back to what you said before, where there are parts of these characters that feel less organic than where the author's trying to have them end up, because we don't spend enough time with them for it to feel organic. Because I think the development from Corvée administrator to the end result of Kuni is possible. I just don't think we spend enough time for people who want. And for me, I just went, this is a documentary. I'm not going to get to see those moments. The person on the screen is literally going to go, and it profoundly affected how I interacted with everything I did from that day forward. And here's everything that happened from that day forward. And I just went, okay, documentary. I will take you at your word. And part of that is just how I came at this book.
And I think also part of it is that the characters are meant to be avatars or ideals more than like characters. And I just wish there had been a little bit more. I just wish it had actually just been a little bit more realistic and a little less paragon of Taoism. Like, you know what I mean? Like that to me was, again, something where I think the book doesn't quite work for me.
And I can absolutely see that. Luckily for me, I wasn't here for that. Like I kind of very quickly came in and went, oh, this is going to be told like an epic. This is going to be told like an epic poem where like you never get those emotional moments out of the characters. Like,
I think if it was a little shorter, it would work better. But also, I'm not really sure what I'm saying, because I liked Kuni throughout the whole book. You know? Like, that's the thing, is like it kind of annoyed me at times, but I was still on Kuni's side. Whereas you guys know, when the author is too much on a character's side, even a little, it annoys the crap out of me.
Yep.
So something in this book did work. And again, you know, part of it is that distance, I think. But that both works and doesn't work.
He becomes a bandit. He's a hacking bandit, and he has to get his wife out of because he doesn't know this, but she's preggo, so he has to get Gia out of Zudi. So he sends this one guy, Otho, to go fetch her, but then they get lost. But it's fine. Zia figures it out, and throughout this entire book, and I'm not going to spend any time talking about it. The gods are coming in and out and being like, I see you, brother. I see you found a champion. And other gods are like, nope, that wasn't me. I didn't put a scroll in a fish's belly. It sounds like something you would do. Was it you? No, it wasn't I. And it's just, and I like the narrator because he did a really good job of differentiating the voices of the different gods. So even though it doesn't say who is talking, you're like, oh, that was Kana or Rappa. It's one of the angry ladies, or like, oh, this is the shark guy who likes to eat people.
It was very Iliad to me, in that the gods are doing their own thing. I don't really. It's weird. I should have disliked this, but I didn't, because, like, again, it's part of just the tone. I think that, like, I just accepted the mythic tone of it, but like I also don't know that the author actually got anything in terms of dividends from it. In terms of like the themes of the book,
talked about how much they like it, that I think from a purely reader experience, I think the author got fuck tons of dividends.
Okay, all right. Okay, there you go.
Thematically, I think you're right.
It's fun to have those two Muppets in the corner of the theater saying shit.
Yeah, especially when they're like these. I liked the gods. I liked the different things that they were represented. I liked the war god. I liked the craggy old turtley guy god. And I like them.
Yeah. No. Okay. I mean, that's fair. That's fair. Again, I feel like the book is not as clear with its themes as it could be, but it's kind of like how you were saying you like kind of tidy, neat stories, which I do too, that are, or at least compartmentalized well. I like books that have like a clear thesis, even if that thesis is not explicitly stated. Going back to kind of the abstract thing, one of the things that happens is the new emperor, right, is just a puppet for I'm going to call him his nursemaid because I don't remember his name, and that's essentially what he is. But he's the guy who
not. What was his name? I think it
he's the
was
nursemaid. He basically was like the best friend of the old emperor and then betrayed him. And then this new emperor he's using as a puppet. But anyway, at one point he comes into a hall with a bunch of nobles, and he's carrying a dead deer.
No. This is Krupo. This is the scholar, not the child.
So he comes in holding a stag, and he goes, "Isn't this a wonderful horse I've brought?" And everyone's like, that's a fucking stag, including the emperor. And he's like, no, it's a horse. And then like people who are on his side in the court start saying it's a horse, and people who are, that's how he kind of figured out who's against him. And this is something that feels like it's from a parable or like from one of those stories. And it's not a thing that would feel real in a more realistic tone of a book. But this scene worked for me. But it's one of the things where like it doesn't always work in the book, and I just wanted to bring it up as an example of a thing that I think works in the book, but is also kind of indicative of what the tone of the book is like.
For me, I think because I did know of the horse and deer event in real life, for me it felt realistic, because that is a really good way to make sure you know who is willing to believe your word is law. And I liked it just because it is a good. Actually, no, I have an issue with this. I just remembered I had an issue.
Hit us.
I don't buy that Krupo would do this. He is such a. It feels like such a militant. It feels like a guy who's going to be actually like ruling and indulging in rule would do, kind of thing. And then he's just like, I want to write my treatise on government and philosophy, and I don't want to do anything. And like,
I think that's why I thought it was Chatelain, because that's actually much more in character for him to flex his power.
It's way more. I would have taken it from Pyrrha much more, but it was Krupo, and I don't like it because I don't feel like it fits with what his character was.
I actually liked Krupo's vignette, which is that he was like the second. It was very Amadeus. He's like the second best scholar, and it eats at him that he's never the best scholar. Because basically, what happened is he was the second best student of a great scholar, and the best student everyone loved, including the emperor that he was working for. And the emperor was like, "Oh, we have captured this other city-state and gotten the best scholar now." And so he goes and he poisons the scholar, the best scholar, even though the best scholar thought he was going to be executed, and the guy had come to apologize for all he had done
and to give him a noble out to
like,
oh god. And it's just, and the thing is, that is where this book shines. The little vignettes and backstories. I mean, even Jin Mazzoti's backstory I liked. The one shipyard guy who like taught her how to read and was like, goodbye my daughter. And she was like, daughter, I was listening to that with Katie, and that's exactly the kind of shit that gets to Katie, and she just looks up at me with her big giant eyes.
I don't think it quite necessarily works, but even Kokomo's has like a tragedy about it. Again, I don't think it quite. Kokomo's? Kikomi. Guys, it's
down to Kokomo.
That's what I was thinking of. Again, I don't think that one quite works, but it's like there are a lot of little small vignette parables almost, or those kind of like very elemental stories in this book. And I think the thing is that there were more of those in the first half, and that's why I liked the first half more. The second half is actually more just like what's going on with Mata and Kuigaru. One thing Earl said that I thought was interesting, going back to the gods thing, I think it came through at the end thematically. The gods are central as a longer perspective than humankind, where they can see how humans may not be remembered the same in history 1,000 years later. That's actually really interesting. I kind of wish it had actually been played a little bit differently, in that the gods would remember the actual events versus what the legend was, because the book is constantly going on about how like you are a part of history that you don't know how it will play out. And so it would have been interesting to have the contrast of like, no, we actually remember exactly what happened, not the events that you guys remember as. That actually would have been an interesting thing about the organicness of history and how it really is shaped by who is there now and the needs of the present and the culture, kind of like the horse versus deer thing. I don't know quite that quite coalesces in the book, but I do think it's kind of an interesting idea.
Sirius brought up a good point. Fyoji, the best scholar, is too idealistic, and Lugo Krupo is too realistic, which is the problem. Krupo hates Fyoji's writings because they're just flowery and they're nonsense and they're not anything you can actually do, and there's nothing, like, you can't apply any of it anywhere, and his are all applicable but vary because they're realistic. They're only working within the current system.
Yeah, and they're like, and Kyoji like dreams of what the world should be like, and that is why men love him. And it's like, and then he murders him again. I think that really worked. One of the Miss Ali Snow says, doesn't the author come from a short story background? That may be why the vignettes landed better. I actually think that may be true, and I think again in a shorter form, that kind of story works better than in the longer form of Amata and Kuni to me.
I just want to say that I think there's more of the vignettes in the beginning because we're getting more of the characters introduced in the first half, where in the second half we only get 2 new characters, really. There's like a couple that come in, but not a ton.
A bunch of the characters just die. Like, that's the thing is, like, the book starts winnowing characters at the midpoint, and so you're not getting new characters where you're just getting characters dying and the remaining characters.
Our boy's a bandit, and then Mata, Zindu, and his papa, or not his papa figure, but his uncle, decide we're gonna go join the rebel forces. They end up getting the guy who is in charge of Tanoa, where they live, is like, come and lead my rebel force. But he's trying to play it cool, where like if the Empire wins, he can claim he was on their side, but if the rebels win, he can claim they're on their side. But then the Zindus just murder him. Mata gets a sword made of bronze and steel, and what are those things called? Gorma? What is that weapon called?
Do you mean the shark tooth sword?
It's not a sword. I think it's a club, but doesn't it have those ones with it has a big ball on the end?
Like a mace, you mean?
I think it's a mace. I think Gorma's a mace. It's either a club or a mace. They definitely said it, but I can't remember. It's a club or a mace, one of those two. Anyway, and he gets those, and they're like, we're going to go support the rebel forces. But the rebel forces are running into some trouble, because right now they are not super well organized.
I think there's an allusion to the Red Turban revolt, in that the only article of like uniform they have is like a turban. Which I thought was like clever, even though I don't,
So he gets those guys. They go off to the rebels. The rebels are not having a good time because the rebels are sitting there being like, "Oh, we're not actually going to drill anyone, and we're not going to do any." And by the rebels, I mean those 2 guys who decided to pretend they were going to be king, and Shigen and Krima, and they're literally just letting their rebels take over stuff, loot, and then eventually they become dukes. When they find that king, he names them dukes. But then the one is like, I don't want to be duke, I want to be king. I'm going to declare myself king of West Kokuru. And the king of Kokuru is like, I was a shepherd like 10 hours ago, so I'm just gonna let him have that. And then he gets rid of Shigen, his partner in crime, and he kills him but makes it look fake. And so the rebels are becoming more like how the Empire are treating the common people. They're doing a lot of looting. They're also Krima has decided he wants statues, and he wants a mausoleum, and he wants all of this stuff. And so he is forcing everyone to build him this palace. And so a lot of them are like, are we in Corvée gangs again? Is this just Corvée gangs part 2?
It was very Animal Farm, where like the pigs at the end have become the humans.
That's exactly what happened. And Mata goes in, and he was like, you are a monkey pretending to be a king, or something like that. He says something insulting, and they attack him, and he like flips a table, and then this giant horse. That's another funny thing that follows Mata through the beginning, is he's too big for horses. He can't ride them. And it just so happens that in the camp where Krima is building his palace, there is a giant black stallion that cannot be tamed. It can only pull things and that.
But Mata is a horse girl. They sense each other's heart, and he follows him to the end of his days.
And literally, like, the horse is like, I'm yours, baby, and him and Mata like gallop out. And I think he they just fuck off. Finn Zindu went to the actual king of Kokuru and has been had not been named, because the other guys were named marshals, so he was just there when Krima kind of goes crazy. Finzindu is named by the king of... Finzindu becomes marshal. Mata becomes like a commander. Eventually, they get Gia. So this is back with Kuni. They get Gia. They're in the mountains. And then I think it's someone... I can't remember exactly how Kuni goes from being bandit to taking over.
Not important.
Yeah. He becomes rebel leader of Zudi, and he takes over Zudi. And he actually does a really good job ruling, and he does it like bloodlessly. And this is where he discovers his knack for bureaucracy and helping entire cities work well. And his friend Kogo is like, we're gonna tax smarter, not harder. And it's a really good system. I liked Kogo as a character. Oh yeah, they declared him Duke, and the Killjoys were ignored. This whole thing, I don't remember exactly what it was, but the city of Zudi was so happy with Kuni, they declare him Duke via populist vote, and the Killjoys that were like, no, that's not how Dukes have declared.
The book calls them Killjoys, which is why we're saying that. The book every once in a while will have like very contemporary language, but you won't notice because the rest of the atmosphere is so good. At one point he said mano a mano, and I was like, that's not Chinese, but it didn't break my immersion.
Yeah. But anyway, he's doing a good job. Mata Zindu gets sent to Zudi because backstory real quick. I gotta zoom out. So while all of this is happening, while Mata's doing his thing, while Kuni is now a duke, things are going well. Krupo, the guy who is the regent for the empire, is he's not doing good. Everybody they're like, these rebels, the taxes, and he's like, I don't want to deal with any of that. So he keeps delegating. But he also decides to be a dick, and he decides to name as marshal of the empire and in charge of the entire empire's military forces a finance guy, like from the tax department. He was a bean counter. He balanced the beans.
He's like my favorite character. Yes. I love that. And then he's actually really good at being a general.
Oh my god, I was on his side for I wasn't I didn't want him to win, but I was here to watch this finance accounting guy do well and use his tools and be like, well, if you think of soldiers as coins, we don't have enough coins here, but if I take from here, I can do this. And it was
he's like, you have to animate people to want to pay their taxes, and in the same way we have to regain the people's interest and stuff. And I really liked that stuff.
I think it was Kindo Marana. I loved Kindo Marana. He was so good. And he ends up being really good. And one of the things he does is he's like, I need a good general. I am not a general. I don't know the hecking fightings. So he goes and he finds my other favorite character, this guy named Namen. And Namen is old. He was the general for Mapidare's father. It's been a while since he was in the saddle, so to speak. Since he held a sword even. And it's just him, his dog. He's got a house by the water. He's chill. He's got flowers. He's just a happy old guy who used to be, and he remembers what life was like for Zana back when Zana was the weakest, worst thought Tiro state of the pre-Empire days. And so for him, when he helped Emperor Mapidare unify everything, he fought as a man of Zana for Zana, and he loves his country so much. Patriotism can sometimes be a problem, guys.
I do think the book is kind of more complicated or more willing to accept the grayness of characters who aren't Mata or Kuni. They two are they two tend to get moved around a lot by the author's hand, but a lot of the other characters are they're good in certain ways and bad in others.
So much of this story is like that. When we first were in Mapidare's head and he was telling his vision of what he wanted, I was like, yo, this is way grayer than I thought he was going to be portrayed as. I thought he was just going to be portrayed as a terrible shithead. And I was like, oh no, this author is not here to do that. So again, Kuni and Mata are definitely caricatures and archetypes, but there is a lot of nuance grayness and subtlety to the other characters that, like, and again, Naman is about to do some fucked up shit. Marana is gonna do some fucked. Eventually, I stopped liking Marana. Naman, I never stopped liking. I love that.
The thing is, though, Marana thought after Naman died that he was gonna he was gonna find the dog and give him a bone. I like that so much. Like, he's a good dude in certain ways.
But I didn't like what he did in a couple of other things. Like, by the end, I was like, fuck you, Kikomi. Yes. Jesus, every time you say Kokomo, I'm gonna die. But anyway.
Basically, yeah, he gets him out of retirement. He's like, we only got one person who can do the job. And Naman's like, oh, okay, I'll do it.
I'll get back in the game.
I'll get back in the game. Yeah, no, exactly. And so he helps raise the army. One thing we haven't mentioned is that one of the ways that Kana had been able to conquer the rest of the islands. Sana was able to capture was because they have airships, which at the beginning I thought were just normal zeppelins that but in a pre-industrial setting, and those are actually pretty dangerous. I think they end up actually being more like magic helium that keeps them up, but they're essentially just like airships. This book is okay. So one of the things that people had problems with is that you can't tell at the beginning of the book quite what is going on with the magic, because there are gods who just show up, and the beginning of the book is a guy in a kite almost killing an emperor with a fireball, and then a zeppelin chasing it away. And so at the beginning you're like, is there magic? And then you realize, and then you're like, okay, no, there isn't. And then you're like, okay, maybe. The thing with and so the whole thing is basically like, it's Silkpunk. It's like in the same way that like adding gears to things somehow makes them work in steampunk worlds, the same thing works here. Guys, Maria's cat is so cute. Look at it. She really wants attention.
She's licking the mic.
She's like, I want to be part of the podcast. She really wants attention. You were not giving her enough attention, Maria.
I was not giving her enough attention. What are you doing?
What was I saying? Oh, right. So in the same way that just adding cogs to things makes them work in a steampunk setting, like some things here just work. Like you can have duels with kites and people left up by kites, even though like I don't think that really works in terms of lift. And also, guys, for audio listeners, Maria's cat is really trying to be involved.
Stop licking the mic, my lady.
What a weirdo.
Do you know how long I've been doing this podcast, madam? And you've never licked the mic before?
All right, we're going to try this for the third time. So, like, at one point, also, they have, like, submarines that are whales, essentially. And no one dies from this for, like, none of these things leak. So, it's one of these things where the expectation is not necessarily well set up for this being Silkpunk. But the thing is, like, it makes as much sense as steampunk. It's just that steampunk is an established genre that we already know. Like, you can just add cogs and it's magic with a veneer of technology over it. And the other thing is that in this book, you really only start with the kites and the airships. Like, the other kinds of technology that get added kind of get added as the book goes on. So it's kind of showing the development of Silkpunk, but it does take you a while to realize, like, oh, that's what it's doing versus it being either realistic or having magic.
Are you moving my mouse? She's sitting right here. She's on the desk.
Why?
I'm just gonna...
What? Why are you being so needy right now, Kitty?
I don't know. I don't understand. What is... Look how giant she is. She
is a ridiculous... She is the Mata of cats.
Where apparently there was these birds that, like, fly, and they found this gas because they lived in this one place, and they took the gas into them, and so they could fly really high. And then the gas is only on Zana, so they were able to take this gas and make airships. And that is what gave them the ability to win the war. And so it does try to make it... and honestly, at a certain point... just don't explain it. You know, sometimes when you try give it a realistic explanation, it can come across as trying too hard. One of the things I like about steampunk is, for the most part, you're like, oh, it's steampunk. And then, like, the explanations make no sense because they're steampunk. And so, like, there's a sense of just, this is the established. And so sometimes I wish that they don't, they just didn't, they wouldn't have tried to explain.
A little bit less explanation would have made it more. And again, coming into an established world where, like, things just work if you put cogs on them is different than trying to develop that world. And I think that makes a little less sense. But where were we with the actual plot?
Naman and Marana prepare for war. They're gonna attack. Naman is going, like, bit by bit through some of the forces, and he is fucking up shit because prior to this point, the rebels have not had any real fighting that was substantial. And Nauman chooses Rima as his first target. And Rima just got, like, they have this new king. His name is, anyway, and he's really good. But Rima is completely, Jizu. Rima is completely unprepared. And Nauman is able to, because he's crafty and he knows what he's doing, quickly overtake them. And he comes in and he basically tells Jizu, like, you can surrender, and then we will take you and, like, flog you through the streets of Pawn, the Immaculate City, or I can literally fuck up the entire island and you guys will be done. And that's the other thing is Jizu was a fisherman. He was a happy, and I can't click it because I have a cat sitting on my mouse. So Will, if you would, thank you. He was happy as a fisherman, and he was propped up as a buffer for Fasa, so none of the advisors care. Like, they don't listen to him, and he ends up being this big sacrifice for his people. Like, he made a huge sacrifice, and Nauman even respects him by the end of it. He's like, God damn, that guy had more, like, he was a person.
Basically, what happens is that Kuni and Mata have to team up at one point to do some kind of a military thing for the rebels.
Yeah, Nauman is going to attack Zudi, and they decide that they're going to face him at Zudi. Nauman comes. They end up outwitting him through a bunch of... Mata thinks it's going to be classic war. You're going to fight, do the thing. But it ends up being more like they have to be crafty. They lock the other guys out. And it culminates in Mata getting flown up on a kite, being like, come fight me, Nauman! Show me you're a man!
Which is cool, but also, he's large and heavy. He should actually be the worst kite person. Like, that was a part where, like, that didn't really make sense, but especially because later they're like, oh, women are best for kite riding and air shipping because they're light.
So we had the 8-foot guy, and I think...
with two giant weapons.
Yeah, and I think one of our, Penny said, Mata on a kite made me tilt my head because as an 8-foot dude, he has to weigh a lot. And I was thinking about how big that kite would have had to be to work for him, which is completely, absolutely true. There's a couple of funny parts, including, like, there's, like, flaming tar, but they didn't have any water or sand buckets. So Kuni is like, we're going to have to pee down the walls, guys. And then, like, all the soldiers are peeing down the walls, and Kuni's like, Mata, get in here, bro. And Mata's like, this is ridiculous. I'll do it, and it's part of their bonding.
I would have liked, so there's a little bit of, like, the buddy cop, like, I'm serious and you're goofy, we have to work to get along, banter, like, thing, dynamic between the two of them, but I felt like there should have been more there. I do just think that part of the book was not well written as it could have been.
The reason buddy cop stories work is because they don't like each other in the beginning. Do you know how it doesn't work? If they like each other the entire time. Because, of course, if you like someone, you're more likely to take their ideas seriously and let them happen. Where if Mata had come from a place where he didn't like Kuni initially, but Kuni ended up, like, they ended up earning each other's respect. Like, if Kuni kind of thought he was a bit of a idealistic oaf, and if he thought Kuni was a, like, gangster, like, trickster, and then through working together, like, because that's how buddy cop movies work. That's how that shit happens. But unfortunately, everybody likes Kuni pretty much immediately, except for his in-laws. Those are, like, the only two characters in the entire thing.
I kind of get why there wasn't more of that, because by the end of the book, the author needs them to split up. But, like, I think it would have been better if Mata had become more idealistic in the ways that he in Confucianism, and that's what really condemned him, and that you could really see him turning into a character, like he had been changed by being at war into being more harsh and severe. Because, like, yeah, and the thing is, for how long that the book is, like, this portion does not last as long as it should have to really bond their characters.
Yep.
But it was a little fun.
They end up winning. It is a great victory for the rebels. They end up going back to the main capital of Kokuru, and everybody celebrated. They end up moving his wife there, Gia, so she can have her babies.
I should also state, I actually really like Gia as a character. She's very funny and a little bit tsundere. But she's not actually in what?
You're right. I didn't think of her as a tsundere, but yeah.
I thought I was mispronouncing it again. No, and she's a fun character, and she's smart, and she knows like herbal lore, so she can do like magic shit. But she's actually not in this book a lot in the middle third.
I really liked her and I wanted her to be in it more. And then when they had to separate again and he had to get a new wife, I was like, I'm fine with the new wife. That's fine. But I was just like, God damn it, why can't we have Gia? I just like her. She's cool. There's a whole middle bit, and this is where I'm going to kind of fast forward through stuff because the ending bit is going to get also complicated. They end up defeating Marana and Namen. Part of this, it's a bit gradual. Kuni ends up getting used. He meets Luanzia, who was the kite guy from the beginning, and Luanzia and him also immediately become best friends after Mata goes off to do something else. Mata and Kuni end up separating after the Battle of Zudi. He gets to see, there's a couple moments where Mata holds his newborn, Kuni's newborn son in his giant hand,
like a coconut.
And it's just like this, just like he doesn't know what to do with the baby. And
Kuni is like the only person he really feels like he could be a person around, which I did like. It really gave both Kuni and Mata depth, really, in that they could do that.
And I liked the idea of Mata only having eaten like really bougie food because of who his but just having completely not interacting with commoners or just having fun, and the idea that Kuni brought some fun into him. But one of the things that happens is there's a point where they invade another city, and Mata says anyone who will not, because this city had been with the rebels. Oh, that's what it was. It was the city that Krima, the shitty king who claimed he was the king of West Kokru, was in charge of. And so they had a terrible time with the rebels. So when the Empire came back and kicked him out, which was Namen, they were like, yeah, we'll stick with the Empire. We're okay with the Empire. Fuck you guys. Like, the rebels treated us heckin' bad. Mata and Kuni come back as rebels, and they're like, anyone in Demu who will come over to our side will be safe and everybody else will kill. And Kuni's like, wait, brother. Let's not just go kill tons of people. And Mata hits him with the, if you are kind to your enemies, you are mean to your troops. And he is very cruel. He does kill a lot of people in this scene. Kuni does not like it. He is very uncomfortable with the actions taken during the scene.
Yeah, and basically this is going to become a theme throughout. This is that Mata likes to kill people who have surrendered. And it's interesting because he does try to justify it in like these people did bad things or you have to do this. It's kind of the whole very rigid ideals over humanity that Kuni the more humanistic Taoist, I suppose, view that Kuni has. But I did like too that the book doesn't ever stop. Like Mata isn't a terrible person in interpersonal. Like the book is still clearly like, oh, he's a character we're going to explore, even though he just did a horrible thing.
He's never just a bad guy, and that is what Mira comes in later to also remind us of at points when we might not like Mata as much.
Well, that's the important thing. Female character to do is to mirror the male characters so that you can understand them better.
Anyway, so they do that,
and then like Mira too, but yeah.
I do like Mira, but again, my girl, like why? And anyway, so they end up splitting apart. When he gets sent back to Zudi, Gia stays in Karuza, and Mata gets sent off somewhere else to do other things. Oh no, he's in Karuza as well, because this is the part around which Kikomi gets introduced. But anyway.
Judo Shrew has a really interesting comment. Also, this is interesting in contrast to the war crimes committing protagonists of books like She Will Become the Sun and Poppy War. That is actually a really good point, because in this book, it's kind of made clear that committing war crimes is not great, but B, the book doesn't back away from still acknowledging the humanity of the character who does it, whereas in those books people do terrible things, but it's sort of muddled and unclear how terrible it was or wasn't, and then the book still wants you to really love the character in a way that feels almost disingenuous compared to this, where it's like, no, Mata is just like, he's still a person. He's still kind of lonely. He's still kind of socially awkward, honestly, is kind of how you think about him. As this big lumbering shadow that everybody's scared of, but also just kind of sits by himself in the middle of a party. Like, that's how I kind of always thought of Mata. And so, yeah, that is interesting. I think part of it is the tone. It could be just the writer. The writer is better, but I also think part of it's the tone. Is that in those epics, heroes do great and terrible things, and they're both great and terrible.
And this book really captures the great and the terrible parts, or I'd say the nice and chill. Except for Cooney. Cooney's always great. And I like Cooney, but Cooney's always like
yeah, it's a bit of an issue. Except for like where he randomly gets drugged and has sex with like a harem. That was so weird.
Yeah, and then just is like, no, I'm going to become king. Like for like a week, he just has a.
I genuinely thought he had been like the harem was trying to like give him a drug to get him to be like save him or something.
I thought he got opiumed.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was really, really weird. But anyway,
and, I mean, yes, he also fucks Tazu, but I don't think he would want to know that.
Oh, yes, that was funny. Yeah, that was funny.
Hysterical. I loved how the other gods were like, so you had to get a taste for yourself. Anyway, so Cooney is in Zudi again, and then Luan Zia comes, and he's like, yo, I have a crazy plan. There was a beggar dude who kind of like was turtle-ish, and he gave me a book, like this teacher guy. He was a teacher guy, and he gave me a book, and the book showed me things that were in my head already, and now I know a thing. I know how to get us into pawn. Because another thing that's been happening is all the leaders of the different Tiro states are meeting to try to find out who will be Princept, which will be the person who gets to make the decisions, and how they're going to deal with everything. But everybody is fighting. But the king of Kokuru, who again was a shepherd like 10 hours ago, is like, fuck all y'all. We are going to war. We're going to do this. I am now Princept. This is what's happening. I forgot why I mentioned this. But anyway,
basically, Luso's idea is like, hey, we're going to run around on these, we're going to use whales to go around and capture the Immaculate Palace, like avoiding the whole army the whole time. And Cooney's like, this just might work. Yeah. And so they go and literally do that. And one of my favorite scenes is they get into the palace, and the Chatelaine this whole time has been like a scheming character. He actually deposed the scholar guy at one point through a scene that was actually weirdly harrowing, and was like, and so he's sitting there. He's yeah, weirdly so for a book that's so abstract.
Let me tell you, sometimes this zones in. Like the torture of Krupo was fucking.
Also, I'd like to point out that torture was not effective this time, which is the correct way that torture should be portrayed. And in all the books that has happened, this is the only time that's happened. And that, like, the confession he gets is just not a real confession.
It's a false confession. Yeah.
So the Chatelaine is like, this whole time he's been like, I'm going to bring down the Emperor's line. And so when he sees Cooney and Ratho, we haven't even mentioned Ratho, but whatever, coming in, he's like got this kind of smirk, like, oh, my plan worked. And then he's about to say something, and Ratho caves his head in with There's a lot of people dying suddenly in this book, and it's really funny because I like that kind of cut of the Gordian knot of sometimes violence is unpredictable.
It gave me a little bit of Game of Thrones vibes of when you're watching the show and you're like, this character's not going to die anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, God. Because I also thought Pyrrha was going to last longer than he did. I thought he was going to team up with Cooney. Nope, he's gone. Goodbye. So yeah, they take over pawn, and this is why I mentioned it. But the Princept basically was like, anyone who captures Emperor Urashi and takes pawn will get to be the king of Gefika, which is going to be a new 7th Tiro state. And originally, Cooney was like, Mata, that's you. You're the only one. You have the bravery, the commitment. It's you. You shall take Gefika. And Mata's like, nah, shucks. Anyway, and then Cooney does it. While that's happening,
actually before
it's while it's happening.
You're right. While it's happening.
While that's happening, the Battle of Wolf's Paw is happening. The rebel forces in the Empire are coming to a head. Marana and Namen are on one side, and then you have Fasa, Gon, the Kokuru forces on the other side. But Marana, there's this general. So Mata wasn't named after his. Oh God, I have to explain. Before all of this, There was Kikomi. Kikomi is a beautiful princess from the island of Araluji.
She hates that people call her pretty. She knows that's a cliche, but she wants to be valued for more. One of the goddesses shows up and is like, "Why are you discarding the one dagger in your sheath or whatever?" That's not what she says.
Use your powers.
Yeah, think about it. And she loves her city, so when the accountant comes and conquers it, she like seduces him, and she almost gets him to rebel against the emperor, but he figures it out.
Yeah, she played her hand too soon, and he was able to see through her too quickly. And so he's like, "Listen, you have a choice. You can either get torn through the streets and I will burn your entire Amu will be dead. Our Luigi, everything will burn to the ground and it'll be your fault. Or you can do what I ask you to do." And at first you don't know what it is.
Well, and specifically, her reputation will be ruined. He'll turn her into like a prostitute, and everyone will know that it's her fault.
And then you think she escapes. There's this moment where you think she escapes, because the next time you see her, she's in she's in Caruso with Mata and Mata's uncle, and Mata has a crush on her. And at first I was like, "Oh, I'm here for this. That's so cute. She's so cute and little, and he's so big and fierce." You can tell a lot about me. But anyway.
And the height of some of her boyfriends.
Only one of them has been very tall.
Yeah, the rest have been
short king.
To be fair, I have never actually liked any of your boyfriends. Well, no, I liked the last one. He was okay. He could make pizza from a pizza oven.
Yes.
Stone. That was pretty cool.
Who doesn't like homemade pizza? Anyway, so what you find out is that Marana was like, "You have to go and make Finn Zindu and Mata Zindu fall in love with you. And then you need to make sure one of them dies. You can pick, but I need the Zindus to be free." Pumpkin, what is happening? Okay, she's leaving. And so she ends up actually really liking Mata, and she does not like having to do shit with Finn. But she decides that the one she's going to kill is Finn, because Mata is coming up in life and Finn is over the arc. And also she's like, but I kind of like him. And so she ends up killing Finn Zindu, but she does it because Mata and Finn kind of get into a fight. So Finn sends Mata far away from the battle. And he's got to be like the rear guard, just like, if we need help, come help us at the end and like transport us back over this strait. And so he's kind of upset about that. Finn thinks he's got like time to wear on Kikomi, but she ends up killing him. And she realizes in the moment that now that she's killed him, if Amu comes out of this war unscathed, everyone will know that Amu cut a deal with Zana, and they will be targeted by the rest of the city, the rest of the Tiro states forever. So as her last moment of saving her people, she decides to make it look like it was just her. She says that she did this out of love for Kindo Marana, and she places the accountant, back on him. He thought he had her. She was like, "Nah, my dying breath, I'm gonna make them think it was you." And that I was just a foolish woman who was in love. And so this character, who was amazing, who had such a cool backstory, and like you're like, "Oh, what is going to happen? A goddess visited her. She must be going to do great things." She ends up dying. And it makes Mata really sad because he liked her, but he also kind of stops caring about her and gets really sad about his uncle because, like Confucian, you got to honor your family.
Well, and men are more important than women too, in that philosophy and life. So this is a point where we need to talk about the women in this book, because the other reason this is such a letdown is she is the second woman in the book. Literally, there's Gia and a cool tavern lady who's in one scene, and those are the only other females up to this point in the book, and we're like 2/3 of the way through the book. Actually, I think we're only half, but it felt like 2/3. And so the book is going to do a lot of white knighting for women after this and talking about how valuable there are. And there's a few more female characters to come. But especially at this point, I was like, why are there not more women involved in, like, rebellions are inherently destabilizing. It's weird that there aren't more women involved in this, or that there isn't a point being made that the old kings are shutting out women from the halls of power. Like, that because especially later, Kuni is going to be like, I'm going to take the underdogs and the women and forge them into a better sword or whatever. And like, it's weird then that it isn't made a point that women are being pushed out of the halls of power in this rebellion.
I think the reason it's not said is because there are just never women in power. Like, there are no, like, you hear from Kikomi that she was never going to be able to rule, even though she is the daughter of the last king. Her like great uncle once removed, gets to be king. There are no women in power in Dara. They are, from the beginning, established as a not powerful or important. So for me, I didn't really need that because I felt like it was pretty decently well established.
I don't know, because I think, especially when you look at historical events, often women do have, like, one of the strongest power groups in Sparta was the Spartan widows, because the men would die young and the women all of a sudden would have all these estates. And so even though they had very little political power, they had all of this money that they could do.
I agree. I think from an economic standpoint, you're right. There should have been
an economic standpoint. When we don't get the wives of any of these people. Remember in She Who Becomes the Sun, there's that one woman who's like, my not that was a good book, it was terrible, and especially its gender politics, but like there is that one woman who's like, I'm my husband is a puppet for me, like, that could have been a character.
Mm-hmm.
A Song of Ice and Fire is actually the world is severely more misogynistic than this one, and you have a lot of women in positions of power, no matter how much people like to hate on those books. And so, like, it's just weird that, like, there aren't any, and then all of a sudden, and later in the book, it'll be like, but women are cool, guys.
Yeah. So I agree that there should have been more female characters that we saw. I don't think, though, that the book needed to say there weren't, like, women were being shut out of power. I just think we should have just had more female characters.
Yeah, I agree. But also, this book tells you a lot of things. So if it really could have told you, or even there could have been, a vignette of a woman who tried to become powerful and then didn't. Like, again, he likes to add in a lot of things. So it's funny you're half having to play with Pumpkin while we do this.
I know. I'm trying to keep her off the desk. She's literally licking.
Why is she being so needy right now?
I know. I think it's because I've been brushing her a lot lately, and so she's just, like, super happy. Why are you trying to eat my bracelet?
She has very strong feelings about Confucianism.
She's like, there was not enough women. Anyway, so, but yeah, so to have Kikomi come up as this interesting, different type of character, and then just get fridged so quickly, in the sense that, like, her death feels less, her character feels less like it existed to be its own character and to explore her than she existed for this event, to kill Finn Zindu, to put a space between Mata and Finn, a wedge, thank you, and to kill Finn and then to die, like that. So, and her legacy afterwards is that, like, Mata isn't even that sad about her anymore. Like, he's just like, my uncle died and I was a bad filial son, like.
So I'm a little bit split on this, because I do feel like she was fridged, and I do feel like it was, but the thing about it is that in the sense of the novel, she isn't fridged. She is very in control of her destiny, and one of the points that the book is making is that she will be remembered as a traitor, but she was not. The real world implications of her actions are good, in the way that the book loves to talk about how people will remember people later. And so almost the fact that she's only remembered as a traitor by Zata is kind of tying into that theme. I think, honestly, the problem is just that she is the second female character up until the midway of the book. And so it does feel dismissive, and also you're like, oh, we're cool females, and then it's like, no females, guys, you don't get to have any. And so structurally, for the themes of the book, it works, but in
a book where I think there were more female points of views and characters prior to this might have felt more less intentional as a fridging, and more fitting in thematically. Sirius mentions, I also wonder if this is part of Ken's skill with short stories hurting him. Like, Kikomi is a short story, and she needed to not be. And I do agree. She comes and dies real quick. It was very sudden. I was taken aback. I
saw Maria being taken aback in the Discord, and thus wasn't as bothered by it. But I still was like, damn it. Yeah. I liked this.
Pearl says, I'm also split on it because we got Kikomi's characterization before she died, but she very much made as much a choice as she could in the horrible situation she was in, which is absolutely true. And then Pearl says, I think Leo should have spent more time on Kikomi earlier for this longer epic. And that's completely right. You had so much time. There's no reason we couldn't have gotten her before. Anyway, Kikomi dies. Mata gets real depressed He's really depressed.
I believe the word that's pronounced is stressy depressy.
Extra stressy to dispressy.
That's there we go.
Yeah, and he's being a big baby about it and doing like nothing. And there is this General Roma who is in charge of the rebellion forces, and he needs to make a decision. Are they going to attack because they're in a good position to do so? The enemy forces, and he keeps vacillating. He just keeps vacillating over and over about what he's going to do. And his advisor, Perling, which is the guy that I mentioned from before, who I can't remember his first name, but Perling eventually is like, fuck you, buddy. You are not making any decisions. And he goes to Mata Zindu, who has been, like I said, positioned on the rear guard. And he's like, Mata, you're the only one who's going to be able to save us. Marana and Naman have absolutely been using this time to do shit. We've got to make a move. And Mata's like, I'm just a extra stressy, depressy. And Perling is like, no, great men don't wait for someone to tell them what to do. They do what they must do. And Mata's like, oh my God, I've been snapped out of my depression. You're right. How could I have wallowed for so long? Let us go save Dara. And they march. And then thus we get the battles of Wolf's Paw, where like they are severely underprepared. They had an advantage, but while Roma was being a vacillating, unsure baby, Marana was getting people to switch sides. He went to Fasa and he was like, hey, you want to cut a deal? He told Gon, if you just don't fight, we won't fuck with you. And so Fasa and Gon suddenly, even though their troops are there, have pulled back and are like, we're just going to wait to see how this goes and who we're going to. And throughout this entire book, the city states, like all these different places are constantly vacillating between who they support and who they don't support. And so like the rebels will take over and then they will keep the Empire flags just in case. They fold them up nicely and put them away just in case they need to be like, no, never mind. We're here for the Empire. Which is, I think, is hysterical, but the Fasa and Gon troops are doing the exact same thing. And a bunch of Kokru soldiers have been fucked up because while Marana was doing that, Naman was having people tunnel underneath, or Marana, one of those two, were having people tunnel underneath the Kokru army, and it just collapsed, and they pour out of it like flippin' ants and demolish everything. And so now suddenly rebels are at a disadvantage. There are 2,000 soldiers left. And I think there's some other ones in Kokru, but Mata comes with his men, which is about 2,000 guys. And he's like, fuck it. And they came in on boats, and everyone came in on boats. And he's like, burn the fucking boats. If you cannot escape, you will fight until you die. Because the minute they get there, everybody's like, General Roma's like, we'll escape now, thank God, take us back on your boats. And he just chops Roma's head off, and he was like, there is no escape, motherfuckers. We are dying. And thus, Mata and the Berserkers, they literally, him and his men go into a battle rage, bloodlust, and they're just, they cut through a swath into the enemy is so, because they hit these guys, they don't bounce back. You hit them with an arrow, they bounce back. They don't take, they just don't feel pain. And they're like, oh God, these are demons. What are we doing? And so the enemy starts falling back, and the tide is turning just from this group of 2,000 soldiers. Very 300, if you will. Anyway, and then Gon and Fasa are like, oh look, the tide is turning. We shall do a helping. And so they come in. So then the rebels end up winning. Mata comes out of it completely gore covered. And at the end of it, he's like, you know what? I'm in charge now. I am Marshal. Nobody told me I'm Marshal, but I'm Marshal. And then he's like, you know what? I'm not just Marshal. Fuck the King of Kokru. He was a shepherd. He thinks he can tell me. I was the rear guard. Fuck nobles. Nobles are the worst. Fuck them. I'm in charge now. I am Princept. I am Hegemon.
We're at about 2 hours and 5 minutes. So I think what we should do, and we're only about halfway through the book. So I think what we should do is we should all summarize what happens next, and then if I miss anything important or we want to talk about a thematic point, we can go there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Go.
So
God,
basically what happens is that Kuni and Mata Mata is really annoyed that Kuni took over the Immaculate City because, that was whoever did that was supposed to become king. And this whole time Kuni had thought he sent a message to Mata, but one of his practical viziers or whatever. Rinkoda had like just not sent the message and had actually fortified a mountain pass against him. So Kuni's like, oh shit, as Maria would say. And then was like, okay, we're going to go away from the city, even though I know Mata will murder a bunch of the people there and slaughter them, and he does. Mata also at Wolfspaw had killed a bunch of, he just commits a lot of war crimes. And so at this point, Kuni and Mata look like they're going to get into a fight, but Kuni goes and, speaks to Mata. And the thing about it's always that's interesting in the end of the book is that even as they are politically not getting along, Mata always has that personal connection to Kuni and is always willing to listen to him and trust him, which Kuni eventually betrays. We'll talk about that in a minute. So so Kuni and Mata make up a little bit, but Mata still doesn't trust him. And what Mata does is he breaks up the empire into a lot of ways that don't make a lot of sense. And he sends Kuni off to a small island where he can't really do much. But he keeps Dazu, and he keeps Jia with him. Jia, meanwhile, has not seen Kuni for a really long time. She's had a kid. She's stressed, so she cheats on him. And then starts being less depressed about it. And Kuni on the island is like, I don't want to...
Also, we should explain Kuni slept with a bunch of Arashi's wives. The previous emperor's wife. He did a week of whoring. So
it's weird though, because like, again, I really thought he was going to be OP. He just does it. I think it's supposed to, I don't know. I think the author just wanted to set up certain things. And then, but Kuni starts drawing to him like, people who might have lost limbs at one point that the other people didn't want. And also his taxes are really smart. And also he starts a culinary school. And then we meet the second really cool female character of this, or third cool character of this book, Jin. Jin is like super tough. She had to pretend to be a guy all this time, but she's like, nobody respects her, but he makes her a marshal, and then she makes him a super good army. Also, Luan is really into her.
Yeah, and another important part, Luan Xia had come, and because originally Kuni was just going to run Dazu and just be just the king of Dazu, and it was going to be fine. But then Luan Xia is like, Mata has made a mockery of what we fought for. Perhaps Mapidare did not have such terrible ideas. And they were like, you must be the one true ruler and unite all of Dara under you, Kuni, because you are the best man for the job. And so then they're secretly building armies, and that's why they find Jin.
And this is also where the book likes to talk about how under the Empire, the commoners suffered, and under the Lords, the commoners suffered. So what's the difference to them? Which... the book had mentioned before, but the problem is that it's hard. It's trying to reference this time before the Emperor that it has not really set up very well, and only now is really beginning to talk about. So like that part to me did not work great. Anyway, Jia and Kuni sneaks out to see Jia. The two of them, he knows she cheated, so they're kind of like, I'm not happy. But then they realize that you can be in a poly relationship, and that his love of being king is part of that poly relationship.
And her love of Otho, her side dude,
her side piece. And but they're like, but we will always be first in each other's hearts. And she's like, hey, go get a wife. You need to have kids. And he's like, no. And she's like, do it. And he's like, okay. So while he's running away from the city, he meets a hot chick who can like do stuff with smoke. She has basically smoke magic. And immediately you're like, okay, this is the fourth female character. This is going to be his wife. And it is. By the way, is this the best polyamory rep we've gotten so far in our entire podcast?
Yes. But it's also not great because it's a guy with two wives in a society where men are allowed to have multiple wives.
Whoa.
And women aren't allowed to have multiple. Nah.
Polyamory, no. Polyamory is not inherently transgressive, and to treat it like it's inherently transgressive to society is to fetishize it.
The system on which this was couched does not allow women to have multiple lovers, so it is not a true system of polyamory.
I didn't say it was. I said the relationship was the best polyamory rep we've got.
I mean, it is, but it's going to be destroyed because Jia and What's-Her-Face are going to end up as enemies and hate each other. So until the society of Dara allows women to have openly multiple lovers, it is a failed system of polyamory.
I was not talking about the system. I was talking about the representation between the characters.
I know. Yes, it is. And the scene where Gia's like, go, get a wife, and I know that you will love me no matter who else you love, blah, blah. That was great. Great scene. But unfortunately, it's then like, now we have to court intrigue against each other for the next... and I don't like that.
I agree with Maria. I would have liked it better if they were hot lesbian sister wives.
No, that's not what I was asking.
I agree with you.
Nah, I mean, listen, could that have been a good thing? Sure. But was that what I was asking? No. I was just asking for, like, Gia not to be like, I must fight against you in the political war. And then
I thought it was okay for a minute when she felt jealous of Rosanna, because like
of
that's a
course.
normal thing even people in
Yes.
polyamorous relationships have to go
Yes.
through to get through that barrier. But the way that it's set up in the next couple books where it's going to be like court intrigue, I kind of guess I get that, like, you know, one of the messages of the book is that power is weird for people and like everything is sort of torn apart by power, but like I don't know. To be honest, though, I also don't know how it plays out in the other books. That was just the vibe I got from the end.
Sirius says, I hope it is going to resolve the animosity that Gia has. Penny says, same. Me too, because I do not like it. It's one of my, like, I love Gia as a character, partially because she's like one of the only good female characters we're really given. But I just like her. And then for her to, like, decide to do this grand thing and be like, you got to do what you got to do, boo. I'm here for you. And then be like, but that bitch is going to get it in court. Like, I will set myself against her. And I was like, Gia, God damn it.
So he goes back to the island, and then he beats the accountant guy. Oh, this whole time Mata has just not been doing great. Mata does not like ruling, which again felt like if Kuni is good at ruling, even though he doesn't have the background for it, why can't Mata? It feels like the author is tipping the scales a little bit.
It's also interesting that Mata, despite everything, he rewards Kindo Murana. Like, that's the other, like, Kindo Murana is now a king of, I think he's the king of Rui? I don't remember, but he's the king of he's the king of a new state that,
he's supposed to keep an eye on Kuni, which,
yes.
Well, yeah. So, and they're like, oh, but Kuni's settling in, but then Kuni attacks with, like, a tunnel that they built under it because an old lady had said, here's a magical thing that'll destroy stone, and then they got a water gun. Again, the steampunk, the Silkpunk elements get more build up as the book goes on. Anyway, Kuni basically he kills the accountant guy, revenge for Kokomi. But one thing we didn't mention is that Namen, the old general that
after Wolf's Paw, they have to surrender, and he's never surrendered in his life. So Murana's like, we're gonna have to surrender, old buddy, and Namen's like, take care of my dog. And you're like, no, Namen. And he was like, I just wanted to feed my dog and be on my little thing.
Specifically, give him a lamb bone. He likes lamb bones.
And it's just so cute. And then you're like, no, not Namen. And then a bunch of crows come out of, I think they're crows. Yeah, a bunch of crows come out of the sky and just take his body away. And you're like, the gods were like, we like you, Namen.
And then also later the accountant thinks like, I gotta feed his dog. Like he actually remembers it, which I really liked. Anyway, he dies. He gets his head cut off by Luan. And then basically Mata takes over, Kuni takes over like half of the country. Mata still has control of the other one.
They're mad at each other, but not.
Right, like they're fighting, but they're not. And like Kuri is like, you're just not a good ruler. You're not the best for the country. And Mata is like mad. And eventually Gia and Risana meet, and it's like, oh, Gia's like, I'm like a little jealous of her. And also she had this lady who ran her house who's really a noble who was like, court politics are gonna happen, you gotta start thinking about that.
It's Mata's aunt.
And this is kind of like the book being like, power corrupts, and that Kuni and Gia are both kind of having to take a more political role and thought than they would have originally liked. And this culminates in Kuni making a peace treaty with Mata, going like, hey, you can keep half the empire, I'll keep the other half. And Mata believes him, because Mata has always had that like man-to-man non-political trust going on. And then, Luanzia becomes like a real shitbag in the last half of this book.
Was it Luanzia or Kogo? I'm pretty sure it was Luanzia. And he's like, nah, this is our moment. It's all or nothing, baby. We're going. It was Luanzia. We're gonna fucking do this. And so then Kuni's like, you're right, for the sake of the empire and the greater good foreafter, I will betray my friend that all this stuff had happened. And so then they fight, and Mata's death scene.
It's so God. One thing is that Mata had this whole time this thing with people betraying him. So Kokomi did it, his uncle, Kuriana, all these people had betrayed him. Also, one thing is that he had met a widow of one of the people who had come to fight for him. And like that really brought home, she's called Mira, and she kind of just hangs out with him after that, where he begins to realize the price of all of the killing he had done, and like what toll it had actually taken. And so Mira eventually is originally going to murder him, maybe, but then she's like, "No, I see that there is good in you. That you have to put on this role." And then she basically, because the thing is, they're besieged, right? Him and like 500 warriors by Kuni's guys, and they keep cutting him down, but it's cold. And so he goes like, when you're captured, tell them that I held you by force. And she goes like, no. And so her choice is to like pierce herself through the heart and die. And then at this point, Mata has like nothing left. So he rides out with like 500 people, and like 80 of them make it out, and they meet an old hermit, and the hermit like sends them to a swamp because he actually doesn't like Mata, which is again like revenge of the lower class. And then Mata is like, okay guys, in this last battle, I'm going to kill the captain and kill one standard to prove that this is the will of the gods, not a lack of strength on my part. He'd actually done that before, and then he had actually done that. And then in the last standoff, he's standing there and he tells his horse to go, and the horse won't go. The horse stays with him. And he's like, I'm sorry for asking you something that I would not have done. And then he kills himself because Mata would never lose a fight.
He said, give them my head. Because he turns to Ratho, who has been with him the whole time. And he says, give them my head. And that way you get to be Duke of whatever this area is. And Ratho's like, nah, absolutely not. And so like Mata takes off his own head, then Ratho, and then all 26 guys that were left, all just, and it's described as pillars falling to the earth. And it's
a good scene. It's a scene.
Great, every once in a while, this guy just knocks it out of the flipping park with
that's the thing, is
emotionally affecting.
He's good at that epic kind of tragedy. There is a tragedy to Mata's character that I didn't always think was the most organic thing, but you do feel the weight of it. So Pearl says, talking about Mira, she did it to make a point she wouldn't betray him. Yeah, that was the thing, is that she wouldn't betray him, which, like, again, I don't love Mira's storyline here because it feels like it's a little too about Mata. And again, she's just, the book by this point is also just talking about how great women are and how like Kuni is using them to like be better. Like they can sew stuff and women can be on kites, which like, somebody described it as white knighting, and it does feel a lot like white knighting at points, where like the book is just insisting that they're great, even as he won't let most of the characters be women in the first or 2/3. And then after this, Kuni buries Mata and tells him that he doesn't know their places in history, but that Mata should be remembered as a great warrior and
maybe one day. Maybe one day Mata will be thought of more fondly than he is at this point. And then some crows, some eagles, a butt ton of stuff happens. Some wolves come out of nowhere. I think there's something else. All of these creatures come, and by the end of it, not a piece of Mata's body is gone. And at first, everybody's kind of like, that kind of looked like the gods were fighting. And then Kogo, who is like crafty AF, is like, look, everybody, all the gods support Emperor Zuni, or Kuni. He is the, oh wow, good job, gods. And the gods are like the other gods are like, you did that just to make us look bad? And they're like, no, I gambled and thought maybe somebody would interpret it that way, but they're humans, they could have interpreted it as us fighting and not being happy with the situation, but they were able to twist it, that humanity was able to twist it in a way that served them.
Yes, thematically, even the will of the gods can be twisted by one man, and like the whole gestalt of culture. And that's more or less where the book ends. I realize we've made this sound a little more thematically coherent than I think it actually is. To me, it's still, I don't know though, because I did only finish it yesterday, and so I'm still, like I said at the beginning, still kind of processing the book a little bit. But I did like this. Again, I enjoyed listening to this, especially the first half more than the second half. I don't know though, because I did have to read this. I was just super busy this week, so I had to read it almost all at once. And I'm not sure if I had that I would necessarily have picked it up again in the second half. I have a feeling that I might have just put the book down and then forgot about it, even though I had enjoyed reading it. And that's kind of my impression of the book to a certain extent. You really have to be in the energy of the book.
Absolutely. I wonder at whether, I don't think this is a book I would have picked up myself, is part of it. As much as I've enjoyed it, and I think once I started it, I would have finished it. Like, there was nothing for me to really not finish a book. There has to be something quite egregious, like very boring, or
I realized we've roasted so many more books this second year than the first year. And what's hilarious is I tried to pick good books starting like 3 months ago only, and we just keep running into like A Million to One, She Who Became the Sun.
And it's just, and so I think I would have finished this if left to my own devices and I weren't part of a book podcast. But I don't know that it's a book I would have picked up myself. That's one of the things why I love the our Patreon and that we do this book club, because we have read so many books that I myself would never have picked up. And I'm actually really like into that. Like, it's been like, what was the one? John Dies at the End.
Oh, yeah.
I would never in a million years would I have read that book. And I got to read it, and it was a good one, and it was weird. And
I will say also, our patrons, like, I was not able to look over all the comments they made, but last night and this morning I made a point to go through because they had some excellent points. Pearl wrote an essay on this, essentially, that I read that I actually helped me understand it better. Lindbergh did as well. Judah Shro, who is Serious Shenanigans, also had some thoughts. I thought a lot of the points that Angry Otter made a lot of sense to me. It's something where like I agreed with almost all of them, but because I was on the wavelength of the book, it didn't quite affect me, I think, as it did them. So like, and again, there was so much discussion of it, I actually couldn't read through all of it. Basically, this is to say you guys should join us and support independent journalism for our book club. It's very cool. It was again, thanks to our patrons.
It is a really fun time. And it is such a unique experience getting to have all of these discussions with everyone, reading these books at the same time, because with every book, even when I liked it and other people didn't, there was always at least one other person who also liked it in the Discord, or like vice versa. So like, it's interesting to see, like, there are times where like I like stuff, but somebody will mention something in the Discord and I'm like, fair. It didn't bug me. Like, there's the moments where I'm the Katie of Akamath going, you're right, but I don't care. I loved it.
It's funny. Sometimes, I don't realize how much you need conversation to understand and spark ideas until we do one of these reviews. Like, a lot of the reviews, I've realized things while we're doing them about the book that I hadn't realized beforehand. And the book club is kind of like that. Like, I sometimes feel like I'm cheating a little bit because I'm getting ideas that aren't mine from that. You know what I mean? But like, no, it's good to do that to widen your mind. And I think the conversations are always quite good, even if they can be divisive. Somewhat.
And I think it helps us because it sometimes, especially when I finish a book very last minute, like I finished this book half an hour before this started. I've been very busy the past week. And so it is really good for me to read the Discord, and it'll help me start putting together my ideas that I haven't had time to process on my own yet. And that's why I regularly say it was mentioned in the Discord. I mean, just join.
I get so much FOMO because we announced them a month early. Everybody reads and talks about them in the first 3 weeks, and I can only talk about them in the last like 3 days. And so I'm always like, we should announce them later so I can be part of the talk. But like, I have to read 3 books before that, which is always a little funny. So the thing about this book is that there are 3 sequels, and the author has actually described this book as almost a prequel to those 3 books, and that those 3 books have one antagonistic culture and follow Kuni's children, I believe, in like a 3-part act. So I don't know. I'm not going to read the sequel because, to be honest, this channel, when we like, you guys should see how bad our Temeraire 5, 6 to 9 video is doing. It's so bad. It's doing so poorly.
It's crushed any hope I had of doing the sequels to Dark Lord of Darkholme.
I don't know. It's very tough. I told Maria we have to balance it with our mental illness or mental health because we can't just do ACOTAR. I would die. So like every once in a while we have to have one for us because like the Temeraire books were so much fun to read that like it's okay that the video doesn't do good. But in this case, I'm a little bit iffy on doing the sequels. It's kind of like the Kushiel books where I kind of want to read the follow-up trilogy, but also like those books are so long that like it seems like it would take forever. So without this podcast, I might or might not have read Wall of Storms, which is the next book. But I think with the podcast, there's almost I really want to read the John Dies at the End sequels, and like those are shorter than these. These are long books. On top of there being 3 more, we would have to do for one video. Mm-hmm. You know, that's kind of just one of the limitations of having this podcast.
It really does take up a lot of my personal reading time.
It takes up so much time. But yeah, I mean, I could definitely see people who enjoy this book. Some people have said that the sequel is more character focused and a little bit more a little tighter in a lot of the ways that books are books, which I could see. He's a very talented writer. This is just a mode that I think is very difficult to write, and just one that inherently will not work for some people.
God, this is so long. We're 2.5 hours in. Okay.
All of our videos end up being so long at this point. All right, sign us out.
Thanks for being here and watching with us, guys. Bye.